Hello, everyone, and welcome to my presentation on adolescent drug use. My name is Carrie Kimsey, and before I get started, I wanted to just make two comments. One, I wanted to provide a warning that there is images of substances and drug use in this presentation. And two, I'm not talking or providing information around fentanyl in this presentation just because I'm relying heavily on the information provided to us by our textbook. And obviously, that's a few years behind, so it doesn't provide any information around fentanyl. But I know I'm positive we all see the effects happening within our communities and the impact that fentanyl is having within our communities and with our children. So I wanted to make those 2 points before I get started. As we've learned in this class and most recently in the chapters for this week, being an adolescent presents many challenges. There are so many changes happening physically and mentally. Within this presentation, I'm going to look closely at the psychosocial development of adolescence, specifically around drug use and the effects it has on the adolescent child during the developmental time. Psychosocial development includes things like relationship with friends, parents, and with the larger society. It entails identity and self-concepts, which are strongly influenced by social norms. What I've learned is that our children are so heavily influenced by social norms and family history, and that could be a big contributor to drug experimentation. Most teens will try psychoactive drugs, which are drugs that activate the brain. Hormonal surges, the brain's reward centers, and cognitive immaturity make adolescents attracted to the sensations produced by psychoactive drugs. It is normal for our adolescents to seek out this experimental time. But because their bodies and brains are immature and still developing, drug use is especially toxic to the brain. Psychoactive drugs excites the limbic system and interferes with the prefrontal cortex. Because of these brain reactions, the drug user is more emotional than normal. They are far less reactive, and rates of hazards such as car crashes, unsafe sex, and suicide are much higher when teens use psychoactive drugs. So let's look at some age trends around drug use. Adolescence is a sensitive time for experimentation with psychoactive drugs, and the use increases from about ages 10 to 25 and then decreases. Responsibilities and experiences make drugs less attractive. Alcohol and cigarette use before 15 create a greater risk for depression, sexual abuse, bullying, and later addiction more likely. Another drug type that is often used by the younger adolescent due to the fact that it is so easily accessible is inhalants. So fumes from aerosol, glue, or cleaning fluids. It is very dangerous for anyone, but specifically the younger adolescent because of cognitive immaturity to partake in this drug abuse, and it could lead to brain damage and even death. Unfortunately, cognitive immaturity means that few pubescent children understand the risk of drug abuse. So looking at some teenage drug use statistics, in 2022, statistics around teenage drug use showed that nearly 20% of high schoolers have been offered, sold, or given drugs on school property. Looking at the image on the slide, it shows that 58.5% of 12th graders tried alcohol, 6% drove after drinking, 16% rode in the car of someone who had been drinking. In terms of marijuana, 16% of 12th graders have used marijuana in the past month. 10% of high schoolers earning A's currently use marijuana, while 48% earn D's or F's. In terms of prescription drugs, up to 10% of students misuse all types of amphetamine. 7% of high school seniors report misusing Adderall. So in terms of drug trends, cohort differences are evident for every drug, even from one year to the next. legalization of marijuana stores selling electronic cigarettes in many different flavors, and hundreds of deaths from opioids. These are 3 examples of changes in the psychoactive drug scene over the past years. And so, obviously, this changes the access to a lot of these different substances, making it either easier or more difficult for our adolescents to access these drugs. So, in some good news, adolescent drug use in the US has declined since 1976, with one major exception, vaping. Availability is notable for e-cigarettes. Even though most states prohibit adolescents from purchasing them, teens can still buy them from multiple online vendors. There's very little guidelines or, structure around buying and purchasing e-cigarettes over the internet. There is also some controversy around e-cigarettes and whether or not it is a healthier choice for our adolescents over cigarettes. They are definitely less damaging to the lungs, but the fear is if teenagers are trying e-cigarettes, then they are more likely to smoke tobacco later. There's also usually nicotine in all of the e-cigarettes as well. However, in the figure on the slide, it shows that the percentage of U.S. high school seniors reporting drug use has gone down significantly since the 70s. The figure also shows that something in society, not in the adolescent, makes drug use increase and decrease. Drug use before maturity is very likely to harm growth and increase the risk of addiction. Unfortunately, few adolescents know when they or their friends move past experiencing drugs to drug abuse. Each drug is harmful in its own way. Commercialized tobacco impairs digestion and nutrition, slowing down growth. It can also cause damage to developing hearts, lungs, brains, and reproductive systems. Alcohol impairs memory and self-control by damaging the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. Adolescents who regularly smoke marijuana are more likely to drop out of school, become teenage parents, be depressed, and later be unemployed. Although all of this data comes from years before it has actually been legalized. Adolescents who misuse opioids like oxycodone, Vicodin, and morphine have an increased risk in addiction, overdosing, harmful effects to the brain, and long-term misuse affects behavior, decision-making, and responses to stressful situations. So what works in preventing drug abuse? Well, we know that massive ad campaigns do help. In the past years, it has cut down adolescent smoking in half because of how they advertised it and how widely it was spread across the country. And the content was very appealing to the younger generations. Parental examples and social changes also make a difference. Throughout the US, higher prices, targeted warnings, and better law enforcement have also led to the decline in smoking in younger adolescents. Looking internationally, laws have an effect. Another interesting fact is that cigarette advertising is actually outlawed in Canada, and the packs of cigarettes have pictures of lung disease and rotting teeth, which I think helps adolescents, learn a little bit quicker of the effects when it's right there on the packaging. It is also important to note that any age restriction encourages younger adolescents to want to partake in drugs used by the older adolescent. Adolescence starts with puberty, and that is universal. But what happens next depends on parents, peers, schools, communities, and cultures. In other words, the future of adolescence depends in part on us. Thank you so much for listening, and I really hope that this information was useful. I hope that it was useful in terms of educating on the effects that drug use has on our adolescents. And then also, I hope that it provided some ideas around preventative measures and the things that we can do as individuals, and also in the work that we do to help prevent drug abuse and drug use within the adolescent generation.